So we got 2 more talks to go. The next up is an interview with Sandy from Scroll, and we're going to talk about what it means and how the whole process of launching a new L2 has been like. So please join me in welcoming Sandy on stage.
Thanks for having me. Not a new
Not a new face.
not a new face to the ETHGlobal audience, but
This is now more of a public catch-up that's also being recorded. Well, the first question I have is, I found a typo on the Scroll's website.
No. How is that possible?
How do I open a pull request on your GitHub to correct this?
I find that surprising after thousands of people have been trying to help us correct typos. And
well, we'll get to contributions on open source maybe at the end of this, but let's kind of start off by maybe giving people an overview of how Scroll came to be. Yeah, and you just launched mainnet just a few months ago, and obviously kind of not even realizing ZK EVMs would be possible 2 years ago to having one of many live and ready and actively being used. It sounds like a wild ride to me. So maybe a quick intro on sort of how you started Scroll and what was the motivation back then?
yeah, of course. We started about 3 years ago. And at that point, I've been in the crypto community for a while as a contributor, community builder, and also sometimes investor. And I got deeper and deeper into the Ethereum infra layer research rabbit hole, and I met my co-founders on the ETH Research Forum. Back then, Ye was a PhD student running a paper on ZK provers, and Haichen was doing AI in AWS, and he also did a ton of research in compilers and prover systems. And so we kind of quickly came together with the thesis that you could build a ZK EVM that is bytecode level equivalent and bring to developers something that is a very good developer experience, but also very future-proof. So something that we can continue to iterate and kind of move the Ethereum roadmap forward by scaling with a kind of a balanced view of security versus scaling. And so that's, we started off as a fun kind of side project and quickly snowballed from there.
That's awesome. Given how fast the space moves, not only just idea generation, but also the execution of those ideas, what does it mean to be future-proof?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think at multiple layers of the stack, from a technical standpoint, there are innovations coming out of every corner. And particularly now, I think more and more researchers and kind of great engineers are coming into the space, so that execution speed is accelerating. And the quality of ZK teams in the space, I can see a market improvement from what I saw 3 years ago. And so that's very exciting. And it also brings forth a lot of opportunities to collaborate, I think. And on the ecosystem front, things move even faster. I think the what people tend to ignore is the price sentiment and community sentiment is a great accelerator for technical innovation. So the part of the GitHub contributor kind of meme that kind of took place organically in our ecosystem, for those that don't know, a lot of our GitHub contributors are kind of open source contributors, and they received the Celestia airdrop and then later on the Starkware airdrop. And so it's been identified as a hot GitHub to contribute to. And I'm sure it will become the destination for many other airdrops in the future. But that kind of erased a question of like, what is valuable contribution? How should contribution be accounted for? And that's kind of a really fun space as we can try to shape where contribution goes forward. So there's been a lot of obviously like typo type of requests, but also a ton of researchers and also engineers coming forth and saying, do you have any open research problems where we can help with? And that's always the start of a great conversation where we could scope out some open problems where the core team doesn't really have any bandwidth to solve, but they would essentially become that kind of community-driven build process makes the protocol future-proof. Yeah.
So that the sheer amount of eyes that are looking to make sure that potential attack points or just improvements are actually on track. That's a really interesting and like a good way of looking at it. We've had a lot of L2s come up in the last few years. They have definitely grown. We're finally at a stage where we can actually say, look, my app has anywhere from 10 to 100,000 MAUs, which was a sentence unheard of 3 years ago, and even less before that. And the kind of the set of questions I have are about just maybe let's have a more honest discussion around what does it mean to launch a layer 2, independent of what tech powers it. And you're in that very early phases of kind of seeing that from the testnet to building to testnet to mainnet to where it is now. And kind of the first kind of question I have is, do your developers care if it's a ZK EVM or if there's some new hot thing on this VM compared to the other one?
That's a great question. I think this ties into the fact of how we communicate the product to developers. So on one hand, there are the type of builders and developers who are very sensitive to incentives, and there are type of developers who are very sensitive to vibes, and there are the type of developers who are very sensitive to cool technology that are being developed and looking into the future, seeing what kind of tools and design space is opening up so that they create something new. And so I think with the recent phenomenon of this like multi-instances of L2, I think that obfuscates and obviously kind of draws attention for a lot of people who wants to experiment with different token mechanism designs. And I think there's a lot of interesting observations and lessons there. So we're keenly looking at what's happening in this space. And on the other hand, I think it just kind of brings truth to the view that what is an L2 and what is the role of an L2 team. So from our perspective, the L2 team's role within the entire blockchain community is to continue making bold technical bets and find directions where we think make sense, where the developers need to go. And that place may or may not be related to like more block space and more like non-interoperable block space. It might be
interoperable or non-interoperable.
So not interoperable. So no one wants to have an experience of, so I already have multi-sig kind of wallets on multiple L2s. And that requires an Excel to manage my personal kind of shitcoin portfolio. And that is not a preferable user experience. And I can't foresee that happening for hundreds of L2s in the future. And I think so innovation on the user end and innovation on the interoperability end is required to push forward the next kind of wave of innovation. I think some like kind of more monolithic L1s can make bold technical bets, and it's very clear whose responsibility it is to kind of push the envelope and find the next generation of build space, design space. But in the Ethereum space, there's the good thing about being very decentralized. And then the bad thing is, I think it's unclear like whose responsibility it is to kind of keep pushing the boundaries of EVM and keep building things that expands the developer design universe. So I think we're always kind of thinking about where does our builders need to get to the next kind of million users and then get to the next kind of million TVL, and how can we be the most supportive in terms of giving them the best chances of succeeding.
I mean, I completely agree. Like that's like the obvious downside of what we see in fragmentation. Like this is the perfect example of what fragmentation is, and now you kind of see that at all levels of not just user experience but also protocol design. For Scroll, what does that actually translate to in terms of what you get to anywhere from talk about to spend your engineering time on improving this so that you actually get to attract more developers? Is there an obvious answer you found since mainnet or over the last just year of over feedback? Or is this something that you think is just long-term commoditized, so it may not actually be the differentiator and you have to think about other ways to attract users and builders?
So I think I've had two recent observations as we're kind of onboarding developers and helping to build a community. The first thing is there is very, very strong appetite for truly innovative projects, whether it's in DeFi or GameFi. And when users are looking across all the L2s, there's a severe lack of like things to do. So I think of L2s as a bunch of like theme parks that are now open, but the rides are all the same. And so whenever there's a new ride opening, it kind of demands like significant and overwhelming interest. And that's great. And that should provide the kind of catalyst and incentives for application level builders to truly innovate. And the second observation is that I think most users are still like very, very price sensitive. So we keep kind of we just dropped the bridge gas fee by 50%, and we're continuously working to make the chain cheaper and faster and more secure and more decentralized. So these things we have kind of lots and lots of updates in the coming months, both kind of related to 4844 and also our internal kind of optimizations to kind of make the chain cheaper. But just the cost is a constant complaint within the community. And I can understand where everyone's coming from. And I think, the chain that can really make a leap in solving that problem while providing a very high degree of security integrity is going to be very, very future-proof. So we want to be that place. We want to be the kind of brand where we maintain high-level security and gradually descend on the cost factor. So that's very, very top of mind for us. I think in some point we always knew that people are price sensitive, but I think what is just kind of having constant real-time feedback gives us.
It's also once you have a mainnet, you can actually see the sensitivity differ across regions because 10 cents here may not be enough or much, but it definitely moves the needle for somebody in some other part of the world, and you get to see that basically very real time.
Yeah, correct.
On the topic of also future-proof from a tech standpoint, how do you think about talking to users and understanding their needs and using that to effectively shape and define the protocol versus having a more neutral opinion on we'll just support all these things and everybody else has the ability to customize it versus hey, you need this thing, I guess this feature is missing. Let us kind of figure out how we can work on this and introduce that as a big protocol upgrade. Have you gone into those types of conversations yet, or is that an active thought?
I think in terms of user feedback, there are always some very obvious and very clear feedback. And there are some feedback that is that we need to take the initiative and kind of push in a certain direction with or without kind of constant prompting. I think the obvious ones are people would like to be incentivized for on-chain behavior. That's a very consistent and obvious feedback. And another feedback is that people are very price sensitive, so they want things to be cheaper and faster. That's also very well taken, very well taken note of. And then the ones that users currently are not super sensitive about, it's about kind of what about the next user? What about the next user? So most of our on-chain activities coming from relatively smaller wallets, and they're relatively active. So I think it looks organic in terms of whale distribution. I think Scroll is relatively percentage of whales on Scroll is relatively low compared to perhaps other chains. And I think that's a sign of a vibrant.
It's a good behavior, yes.
I think that's a good behavior, and I think I forgot where I was going with this.
Shaping up the tech stack because of the request.
Yes, of course. So we need to think about if that is the kind of the community profile, then how do we onboard the next set of community set who are perhaps not on crypto yet. And that opens a whole lot of like last mile design problems where we need to collaborate with wallets, and we need to kind of think about this like interoperability problem. So there's a lot of innovation, whether like, you think of it, it may not be on the protocol level, but like once you kind of go to users, there's a ton of kind of product level decisions that you need to make, and you need to collaborate with multiple parties along the user experience chain. Which I imagine is a lot longer than your average.
Yeah, and that's actually a constant cycle too, because you can't be done on that one. I mean, I was gonna just generally ask, which you sort of partially already answered, is like whose responsibility is to kind of think about those abstractions, because sometimes we've seen the protocol say, well, we're neutral, we're not going to have anybody decide, but some people take a very active role, and it seems like you're on the more active side on making sure that you get to solve the user issues here. How do you think about interoperability altogether? What does that mean to you, and what is Scroll doing to help simplify that?
So I think interoperability is a very, very challenging problem. There are lots of technical hurdles to provide like a truly interoperable experience. Right now, you can't do NFT swaps across L2s. And you can't, there's just a lot of things you can't do, even within the Ethereum ecosystem, even though everyone is EVM. And that is a really difficult thing to do. So I think the way we approach problems like this is think about kind of in 5 to 10 years time, if the ecosystem is to survive, what would the end user experience look like? It would be an experience where you could onboard with a wallet and not worry too much about the chain underneath, but somehow kind of be able to build a position and an experience. And so we start from that place in mind and try to kind of work backwards. And in that kind of user journey, I think there's a lot of explanation about why like AA Wallet hasn't really taken off yet, and also why kind of the multi-layer kind of ecosystem positioning is actually really hard for coordination efforts.
One thing I want to come back to is, so you kind of talked about the user behavior, you kind of talked the developer behavior, but as a protocol, how do you think about the geographic focus of where your community is and should be? And have you noticed any trends or patterns or things that you think are worth optimizing for?
So I think we might be in the minority here, who thinks kind of like regional relationships and dominance is very defensible. And it is of our view that if you are the kind of the most, if you build a community in certain regions, and those are very long lasting, and those kind of solid communities within kind of the more unexpected places can really help you build a brand, and that can create kind of crossover impacts into other parts of the ecosystem. So our experience building the community in Asia and also in Turkey has brought a lot of valuable lessons. And I think just the kind of the builder awareness and where that intersects with certain problems within like a particular subset, I think those are very, very like valuable. And but obviously, I think crypto exists predominantly on Twitter, and Twitter is
now Farcaster,
and maybe later on something else. And so I think the crypto core always exists somewhere online or on chain, but having kind of different kind of regional grasp of builder preferences and kind of building mindshare. I think that's a strategy that we think it's fantastic and it's playing out for us.
I think that is definitely one of the opinions that I feel like I've fallen in the minority category for sure, but it seems like you've already seen enough traction here with this, and these things compound very fast. So I can't wait for a few more months of data points on this. My last kind of question to you is, what can we look forward to from the Scroll team over the next few months or this year? Anything interesting that's in the works or things you're excited about?
I think we're just very excited to help some of our ecosystem project with their cold starts and launch. A bunch of them have been preparing for a long time, and I think now is the optimal time for some of these kind of well prepared projects to kind of go to market. And in terms of our core team, we're constantly iterating and shipping. And I think this year you can expect a lot of updates that can probably bring our overall cost and speed like up another order of magnitude. So our core team is very focused on the long-term mission of bringing the most secure and also the cheapest out to our users. And then we're also going to be thinking about decentralizing different parts of the stack, starting with prover decentralization, and later on perhaps moving to like sequencer decentralization probably next year.
Amazing. That's a great set of milestones to have. And thank you so much for this chat.
Thank you for having me.
Excited to have you again.